now live.
Yeah, be good to do.
Right, am I now co-host or whatever it is? No, I'm not. Yes, I am.
No, I've just made you host, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, well, it's 6 o'clock. We have no guests, I understand, speaking to us this evening. So please could I remind members that you mute yourselves and raise your hand when you want, yellow hand when you want to speak. And when you finish speaking, please remember to mute yourself. Only one piece of information to let you know that we had no deferrals from the additional chairman's actions which took place yesterday morning. Okay, so we'll start the meeting. Item 1, do I have any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chair. I've no apologies.
Ian, Councillor Craigsley, Councillor Dowling has just messaged me and he says he's been trying to connect to the internet all afternoon, but no luck. So he's sending his apologies.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Item 2, declarations of interest on items on the agenda. Do I have any Councillor Fradgley?
I have had discussions about the agenda, the item about the bollards, which is coming back to the committee today.
Is that it?
Yeah, I mean, I had the discussions prior to the last meeting, but I just want to repeat that I have had discussions with Councillor Pemberton before the last meeting.
Right, thank you. Councillor Cleeve?
Yeah, just obviously the jewellery store is a Stratford Town Trust building, so just declaring an interest as a trustee.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor?
Exactly the same, Town Trust interest in the property.
Right, thank you. And that's it. Item 3, to receive written requests for dispensation for disclosable pecuniary interests. There are none. Item 4, to grant any such requests. Item 5, public participation of non-agenda items on matters under which the council has control of or is a consultative body, subject to a time limit of 15 minutes, 3 minutes per speaker. We have no public here who wish to speak. Well, we have no public here. Item 6, consultation presentations on pre-planning applications. There are none. Item 7, to approve the draft open minutes of the Planning Consultative Committee meeting held on the 2nd of March. Could you please raise your hands if you're in agreement? Councillor Lee? Oh, right. Okay. Right, that's fine. Thank you. Right. We'll now go to agenda item 8, the Town Clerk's Open Report, 8.1. The list of planning applications deferred from the Chairman's action has yielded one, of which is to do with the wheel. Can I ask Neil if he could do a presentation on the wheel? Thank you. No, not physically on the wheel, Neil, but
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, everybody. This probably needs no real introduction. It is a planning application for the installation operation of an observation reel with associated equipment for a period of 6 months within each calendar year. But importantly, this is a permanent consent that's being requested. So there's no end date. This is a planning application for them to use or to have the wheel on site 6 months in each calendar year with no end date. you'll be familiar with the location. It's the same location that's been that the wheel's been in situ previously. So it's just to the south of the bowling club. That's the block plan showing the site compound, the area with the ticket office and the welfare unit, effectively what they call it there, and associated infrastructure. The elevation of the wheel, 40 meters in height, and the base that it sits upon is 20 or just under 26 meters in length, and that's an aerial view, if you like, of the structure that supports the wheel being in the center here, and that's obviously the hub. In terms of the infrastructure, associated infrastructure, the welfare unit, simple porter cabin, there's a small generator, and then obviously the ticket office booth as well. So just to recap on the planning history, this first came about in 2016, so about 5 years ago, just under 5 years ago. And planning permission was granted in July of 16 to use the site for a period of 6 months for the observation wheel. There were planning conditions imposed, they're listed on the bullet point there, most notably that it should be removed by 31st of October. So it was only a temporary permission. It should only be operational between 1st of March and 30th of September inclusive. And there was a daily operating restriction of no earlier than 10 a.m. and no later than 9 p.m. There were also conditions in respect of amplified music, external lighting, and there was some discrepancies, I believe, on the height of that application. The council confirmed that it should be a maximum of 35 meters in height. There was also some landscaping conditions. You objected to that planning application at the time. You queried accuracy of the planning application. You were concerned about overlooking to nearby residents. You felt that it would have an adverse visual impact. There would be excessive illumination. There would be a loss of some parking spaces and also increased pedestrian congestion on the tramway bridge. Notwithstanding your objection, as I say, the planning authority granted permission for it in July 16. In 2018, a further planning application was submitted, again for an observation wheel. I believe this was a different operator, and the height of the wheel was 40 meters, not 35. But you made no representations at that time and suggested a 12-month consent should be given based on the fact that it was a new provider and the wheel was 5 meters higher than previous. And you also raised concerns about it being a larger compound and more parking spaces being lost. Importantly, that planning application, which was approved by the District Council in March of 2018, granted consent for the observation wheel to be in situ for a period of 6 months within each calendar year for a temporary period of up to 3 years. And that's obviously now expired, hence the current application before you. Please note similar operational conditions in respect of the March to September inclusive and the 10 a.m. to 9 p.m. Inclusive, the music and the lighting and the landscaping. So the application that's before you is effectively the same as you've seen in the last 3 years. I believe it's the same operator, although that's not a material planning issue. The structure itself is what's before you, 40 meters in height, and they would like to use it for 6 months in any calendar year. They haven't specified that in the forms, but one would assume it's still peak season, 1st of March through to 30th of September. But obviously the District Council and yourselves in responding to the application can stipulate that that be the case. And additionally, you can still require the same controls in respect of the daily usage, amplified music, external lighting, etc. But as I said at the very beginning, this isn't a temporary permission. This is a permanent permission to use it every single year for up to 6 months within each calendar year. So that's the fundamental difference with this planning application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Neil. Right, councillors, I would like you to, if you've got any questions of points of clarification from Neil, please raise your hand, your yellow hand or whatever colour you've got. Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, just on the wording says installation 6-month period, but so does that mean they can't, or is it operational? It sort of implies it's both. So they can't, in the 6 months, they have to both erect it and then use it and take it down within the 6 months. Is that right? Because certainly last year it might have been out of use, but it was definitely up for longer than 6 months.
Yeah, the wording installation and operation are included in the description of the development because that's what's controlled in planning terms. So in other words, it's the actual physical structure needs consent and the use of that land for this purpose needs consent. So that's why that's included. I can look it up whilst the debate's going on, but I think there was a condition which allowed, let's say, a bit of leeway in terms of actually in the actual installation process, because obviously that takes a few days to do. It's obviously a delicate operation, involves cranes, etc. So that whether or not that 6 months includes the setting up and the breaking down of the structure, I'd need to just check and clarify that. Obviously, we've had other things going on in the interim as well, which may have affected the ability to put it up and take it down in a timely fashion.
Yeah, that's it's just what I wouldn't want to agree to is something that would, in theory, allow it to be in situ for 12 months of the year, but just operational for 6 months. And I'm not quite sure that wording is specific in that respect.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, councillor, and I'm pretty certain that the district had captured that in the conditions that they imposed on the previous application. As I say, I'll find that information out and update you in a moment.
Great, thank you.
Councillor Cleeve.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. If it becomes a permanent planning permission and circumstances change within the town or anything, is there any kind of get out clause other than if they break the planning restrictions, or is that it?
Yeah, I mean, I hate this phrase, but it's a good question. And it's one that you do need to give consideration to. What they're effectively doing is applying to have a permanent consent where they can use it without an end date every single year. Now, obviously, there may be circumstances where they perhaps don't do it 1 year and then also skip a year, or it may well be that after 4 or 5 years, for whatever reason, they just stop and it permanently ceases. But if they apply for and get permanent permission, then that means that even if there's a skipped year or 4 or 5 skipped years, it can then come back and be installed. So I think the point you're raising is circumstances change. You've got the waterside action, area action plan and other things that may or may not happen. So I think reading between the lines, your question is it prudent for the district council to grant consent for a permanent facility here, or should it not be another temporary consent? And whether or not 5 years is slightly more generous than 3, but gives you that safeguard as to it's not absolutely permanent. I mean, obviously it's an inconvenience, if I can use that word, applying every single year to renew a permission, and it's costly, it takes time. 3 years is obviously better than 1 year. 5 years from the applicant's perspective would be better than 3 years. So yeah, I personally and professionally, I think there would be some elements of doubt or concern about an absolute permanent permission for it to be there for the 6 months every single year without an end date. And it might be prudent to suggest a shorter period of time, whether 5 years to me seems a good compromise. Yes,
thank you. And one other question, is the planning permission for the operator? So if, like, between the first and the second time we had it, the operators changed, is this just for this particular operator, or is it more for the site?
As with any planning permission, it goes with the land, not with the applicant,
Okay.
unless it is a personal permission. They've not sought a personal permission. Personal permissions haven't been granted in the past. So I would imagine that that this is going to follow the same suit, and it won't be a personal consent. So the operator could change and benefit from the planning permission.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Lee?
No, Councillor Cleave asked my question.
Oh, right, thank you. Any other points of clarification that you wish to ask? No? Okay, thank you.
Can I,
right.
sorry, Chairman, can I just answer
Oh, yes.
Councillor Jackson's query on
Right, okay.
in respect of the construction and deconstruction? My memory served me correctly. Condition 1 of the 2018 permission allowed them an operating period of 6 months between 1st of March and 30th of September inclusive, plus 5 days immediately before the start of the operating period and 5 days immediately after the end of the operating period for construction and dismantling time. Now, obviously, I don't know what circumstances took place where it seemed to be slightly longer than that, but obviously there'd be a degree of tolerance if something unusual happened, if the ground condition was particularly, flooded and boggy. The cranes obviously can't come onto the site to remove the equipment, that sort of thing. I think you'd have to take a pragmatic approach, but it certainly, that condition wouldn't mean that the wheel could stay there all year round, but only be used for 6 months, because clearly that would have a much greater effect and impact.
Thank you, Neil. I think the answer to one of the questions also that was asked was about how it went on last year up until January the 4th. It was taken down, and I think that was due to the situation that we're in the COVID era, that it didn't actually start in March because, we were going into lockdown. So I think, I don't know, but I think some agreement was made between the district council and the applicant to extend it, particularly as they wanted to be able to provide something before, during September, October, etc. So the final arrangement was that they got until the 4th of January. And to be fair, they did take it down on the 4th of January, or begin to take it down. Councillor Taylor?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I was just going to clarify what you just said there. Actually, I think if you remember, normally our wheel, when it finishes to operate, is normally dismantled and transferred to Leicester city centre. And at the time, Leicester were in obviously further lockdown measures, which meant it couldn't go there, which was the reason it stayed here until the longer period.
Councillor Cleave?
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, one more question. I know on the past planning permissions, they've had the specific months put in, obviously, bar the pandemic. Would that still be in the planning permission now? Are they looking at the set dates if it's 6 months? Because could they possibly end up going, actually, well, if it's 6 months within one calendar year, could they do July to December and January, June, and basically have a whole 12 months without breaching? Or is it still going to be set March to October?
Yeah, I'm not sure that it's specific in the planning submission that I've spotted, but it's something that I think that you ought to give some consideration to. But at the same time, given we're in uncertain times, having that degree of flexibility might be quite prudent, and that's perhaps why they haven't specified themselves that they want to use it between the 1st of March and 30th of September, because circumstances may mean that they can't put it up until April or May, and they could have it, you know, in October, November. But it's something that perhaps through the chairman, you might want to discuss with the planning officer, because I suspect the officers are having a similar conversation with the applicants.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions, points of clarification? No, right. No, we have no speakers. So we'll go straight into the debate. Who wants to start it off? Don't all be shy. Councillor Cleeve?
Thank you. Yeah, I know there's necessarily the bad will, I think, against it now that it's been going. People are getting used to it, but I still think a permanent one is a concern to me as well. And I think, as Neil suggested, maybe a 5 year, so extend the 3 years, but maybe a 5 year limit on it, because I think to say permanently now, as we said, it's so uncertain times anyway, that actually being able to reapply, and also maybe set some months, but be specific, so they couldn't potentially do 12 months back to back by timing it. Not that they necessarily would, but maybe set a 6 month period with a degree of flexibility.
Thank you. Next one, Councillor Dyer, could you raise your hand in the traditional way rather than waving your hand?
Sorry.
Councillor Curtis?
Thank you, Chair.
Okay.
Can anyone say what the fee paid by the licensee to the district council is? Do we know that at all?
I personally don't know, but obviously there is something that, and in fact I did talk to Neil about this, that I presume that this will have to go to committee, because the district council will be obviously making some money out of it, so they can't, they shouldn't really be deciding this by outside the committee.
I mean, my thoughts really, to be honest, my view is it's such a relief to see it gone finally. And I think the question I'll be asking, well, I am asking myself, is there a clear benefit to the town from having it there? Personally, I'm not convinced there is. I certainly think it would be a very poor idea to give it a permanent license, and personally I'll be in favour of not granting it a license at all.
Thank you, Councillor Curtis. Next I have is Councillor Fradley.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to say probably something. I think actually it shouldn't be on a permanent basis. I think 5 years is a reasonable compromise. I would slightly disagree with Councillor Curtis. I think this is something that a number of people in the town actually do quite like now, although quite a few people vociferously don't. It's Marmite, chalk and cheese. But I would actually go with 5 year, with the caveats which are there about music, light, etc., all the issues that we agreed to before is where I think I'd like to go. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dyer?
I think we will more than ever this year need to encourage day visitors and people like that, so I favour 5 years.
Is that it, Councillor Dyer?
That's it, yes.
Thank you. Councillor Lee?
Yeah, I'm in agreement with everyone so far in terms of that it shouldn't be a permanent permission, but time limited. I think five years is reasonable. I had a read through all the comments submitted through the planning portal. Again, people are sort of stating fairly similar reasons for not liking it, principally visual, which is a bit, to say, the Marmite probably element to it. The parking. The one thing that did crop up, which doesn't seem to be covered particularly well, is the noise. So obviously it talks about music, and there's a condition associated with that. But with the operation of it, a lot of the local residents are talking about creaking. And I think that should be dealt with if a consent is given. I don't know exactly how to deal with it in the context of this. I mean, I work with wind farms. I've had to deal with many noise conditions associated with planning applications. I don't know exactly how you'd cover it, but what you'd want to do is ensure that it wasn't causing the squeaking noise, which has been cited in many of the comments made, and how to combat that. I mean, I guess that's probably as simple as making sure that it's well greased would probably resolve it. I think there's probably just a maintenance issue there, but I can imagine it becoming a bit of a nuisance if you are close to the wheel. I mean, certainly, I mean, looking through the comments, I mean, most people objected to it. There was actually one person there who objected to it to start with, lives nearby, actually doesn't mind it so much now. There's always comments around where it should be. I think, say, 5-year consent, but also looking at a possible condition associated with noise and upkeep.
Thank you. Councillor Cleeve, do you wish to add anything? No? Mr. Mayor.
I agree with what's been said, really. I think the objections that we all had, well, we all had concerns about it when it first came forward, but I think once it's been up, I think people have got used to it, and I think it is an attraction. I mean, we might argue about the benefit to the town, but it is a potential attraction for visitors, and I think we need to be encouraging people to come forward to the town to support the town. I don't think I'd want to do something permanently, and I have a little bit of a concern about they could change operators without any input from us, which is but I don't think that's probably a question for Neil, just to confirm that actually it's the application that we are considering, and that a change of operators is not something we can influence or come back to. But 5 years, I think I'm fine with that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The other consideration is that we all know that there's a project called the Riverside Project, and the REC is actually part of the Riverside Project. But as far as I can see, there has not really been too much work done on the southern end, i.e. the REC. All the concentration's been on the northern end along the Warwick Road. What impact or other that might have on the location on the Riverside Project, I don't know. But there's always that. I mean, you know, there's a possibility that the wheel might have to move somewhere else if that's what happens. Councillor Curtis.
Thank you, Chair. If we're considering that the wheel is a good thing because it brings visitors, it's an attraction to bring visitors into the town, I'd like to actually see some data that supports that. It may be that it does, but I think if we're sort of making proposals based on assumptions about the number of visitors it brings, I think we should base those on sort of actual hard data, so we've got an evidence base. If we want to have it there because we think it looks nice, that's fine. But if we're basing it on the fact that it brings in tourists to the town, then I think we need an evidence base to support that.
Well, I could say, oh, excuse me, go away.
All right. Oh, sorry, I thought you were me, Chair. You're muted, Chair. Chair, you're muted.
Sorry, that's Councillor Voss. I forgot. If you want hard evidence one way, Councillor Curtis, do you have hard evidence the other way?
No, but I wasn't asserting
so we haven't got evidence either way.
But Chair, I wasn't asserting that it was bringing in tourists. I think if we are basing decisions on that, it should be evidence-based. That's all.
And I think you should have some evidence the other way as well.
But I'm not saying that it doesn't. I am saying that if anyone is saying it brings tourists, I'm not saying that it doesn't bring tourists into the town. So I don't need to prove the negative. If people are saying it does bring tourists in the town, where is the evidence for that assertion?
Right. Councillor Taylor, I'm sure you've got some evidence.
Thank you, Chair. Personally, I think what we've got at the moment, as long as we stipulated the 5 years, and some of the conditions that we previously had, i.e. the months that it actually ran through, I haven't got a problem with the wheel being there. With regards to it attracting visitors, if in answer to the question there, I think what we should be looking, I can't remember anybody actually said it was an attraction bringing in, maybe I missed it, but I think what we need to look at from the town point of view, especially as we come out of this particular lockdown and encouraging people to come to the town eventually when it is safe to do so, that we need as many attractions to keep them here as long as possible. And the wheel has always been something that gave people something else to do here in Stratford, other than just the attractions that we have had for many, many years, which sometimes are only attracted to certain parts of the community. You have to create something for everyone in this town to be able to keep them happy. And I think personally, the wheel has been accepted over the years by the majority rather than the minority that are against it. And what I've seen on recent Facebook forums, more people are supporting it out there than I ever thought they would do.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Cleave, you've got a different coloured hand. It's not sort of the brighter yellow. It's a faded yellow.
I don't know. It's there. This might have been a point of clarification rather than a question now. So if I can't ask it. But is the location set? That I guess the location is where the planning application is based. Because if you mentioned earlier, Chair, that if we can't go there, we can't go there. Is there anywhere else that it could go, or is that planning application that's for that specific site, isn't it? So if they had to move somewhere else, if we were redeveloping for the Riverside project, would they have to then put in a brand new planning application?
Through you, Chair, you're absolutely correct. This application seeks permission for the wheel within that red line application site. So if they had a desire to move it somewhere else within the town, then that would require a separate planning application. It does also beg the question that, and I'm sure this wouldn't happen, and I don't want to alarm you, but in theory, if a permanent permission is granted for this and it had to move somewhere else or wanted to move somewhere else, you would have two concurrently running planning permissions potentially, and potentially two wheels. I'm sure that would never happen because there probably isn't the demand for it for a start. But that's the sort of danger, I suppose, in having a permanent consent. It's valid forever. Even if the operator decides to stop using it, someone else could come along at any point and use it effectively.
Thank you. Right, does anybody else want to say anything before I ask for a proposal? No? Right, would somebody like to propose? You've all gone quiet. Councillor Lee.
I'll have a go at this then. So my proposal would be we object to the application as it currently stands, but we note that we would remove our objection if the length of time sought for the wheel was reduced from permanent to a 5-year period. And I'm also would be keen on there being a additional condition on on the wheel, which hasn't been used before, which addresses the issue of noise, not from music, but from the mechanical operation of the wheel, and ensuring that it's maintained in a good working order.
Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Cleave? Thank you. Right. Could I take a vote on that proposal, please? Oh, sorry, Neil.
Thank you, Chair. Just before you do, I'm not sure that Councillor Lee's second condition is a planning matter. And I understand what the concern is. Obviously, planning can control things like amplified music, but a structure making a creak or a wind because it's not maintained properly is. I'm not 100% convinced that you could come up with a planning condition that would adequately deal with that. If it was me personally and it was squeaking and rattling and making all sorts of noises, I wouldn't go on it. So I think it's probably in the best interest of the operator to make sure that it's not making such noises to put their potential customers off. But it's obviously happened in the past. I don't know to what extent or how loud it is, but bearing in mind that there is an operational restriction anyway, so at 9 p.m. the wheel shouldn't be operating. I would suggest that a 10 a.m. to 9 p.m. operation, if there were minor squeaks or noises, then that would be an acceptable time for those noises to take place in the normal hubbub of the town and the recreation area.
I'll just respond to that, if that's okay. You certainly can put noise conditions onto a planning consent, because I've worked with lots of them. In terms of how you do it with this particular instance, I'm not sure. I think the issue is principally not the operation of the wheel, but it could be the gondolas in the wind. So it doesn't necessarily have to be operating for it to cause a noise. So I appreciate it's a difficult one to actually pin down. I think it is a point worth making, though. If someone, I could probably think of one, but it's not off the top of my head. I probably couldn't think of what condition could be applied. But there certainly is. I've seen plenty of these sorts of conditions on the consents I've been working with over the past 20 years.
Are you still wishing to carry on with your original proposal, Councillor Lee, or do you want to adjust the wording?
I think it could be a recommendation that it's looked into. I mean, I think quite rightly, as Neil's pointed out, it's actually quite difficult to do in practice without getting onerous around having background noise data and having methods of working on it. I mean, certainly in the wind industry, it took a very long time to resolve. This is going back to the 1990s when it was resolved, and there was a set of rules that were established in the 90s, which have subsequently been applied on all condition planning permissions since that point under the Town and Country Planning Act. So it's one of those things. I think it does need recognition. I'm certainly seeing it from the comments that there is, and I could imagine there being some sort of disturbance noise, not necessarily from the operation of the wheel. I think it needs considering. Again, I don't propose a solution for it, but I think it's a comment we can make. So
you want to make a comment rather than?
Yeah, I think if it's done in terms of a comment, so it is recognised. Because if I look through all of the comments made by the people who have mainly objected to this, this is a common theme, noting the noise and the squeaking from the operation and non-operation of the wheel.
I could say I think that there's quite a few people moved house because of that. Councillor Cleave, are you happy to second that slight change that Councillor Lee?
Yes, still happy to second. Just wondered if he would be happy to also put in a time restriction as well, as suggested by Neil.
Yeah, I think the time restriction's already there as well. Certainly in the previous. Yeah,
it was in the previous, but I don't know if we have to specify it now.
I don't think it makes any, it doesn't add any harm.
Happy to second then.
Okay, right. We have a proposal and a seconder. Could I take a vote on that, please? If you'd like to put your hands up. Well, I've only got 2 hands up at the moment. No, sorry, can you put your yellow hands up? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Right. Not everybody's voted, so does anybody oppose this? Would you like to? Right. So it's 1 opposing it. So the motion, the proposal is carried. Thank you. We will now wait for Neil to key something in. Well, he's already done it.
Right, I'll read out what I've typed in the usual way. I've hit the object button and I've said the town council is concerned about a permanent consent being granted on the basis that the area is part of ongoing wider strategic considerations, i.e. the Riverside project. A temporary 5-year permission should be imposed with the same restrictions as per the previous approval, including the 1st of March to 30th of September operating months. The town council would remove its objection if any consent was subject to a 5-year temporary consent. The town council would also recommend consideration of an additional condition on preventing or controlling noise from the wheel caused by wind rocking the gondolas when the wheel is not in operation.
Thank you. Right. Everybody happy with that? I can't see anybody objecting to it.
Sorry.
Councillor Curtis?
I just, sorry, I know I objected to the motion, but I just wonder if what Neil has put in, sorry, Chair, is a little too specific about it just referring to the noise of the gondolas, because I think there is other creaking and associated noise with it. And if it's only the gondolas, I just wonder if that, I mean, Toby, I'd defer to Councillor Lee's guidance on that.
Thank you, Councillor Curtis. Have you got any evidence of any other noises?
Yes, I've heard it creaking as I walked past it.
Yeah, it's a difficult one, that.
Are you willing to accept that wording, Councillor Lee, that Councillor Curtis has proposed?
Yeah, it could be done generically in terms of any, yeah, trying to get the wording right for it, because what you're trying to avoid is the kind of, yeah, the squeaks and creaks, which, to be fair, the operator won't want. And I'm sure would do something about, but you don't want to, yeah, cause nuisance from it. Obviously, there's environmental health that could get involved through that side anyway. I think just put etc. Perhaps it could be example caused by wind rocking the structure. That's probably the way of dealing with it.
You mean an EG?
Yes, because I think that this seems to be the thing which is causing people grief on the comments. There's some sort of squeaking. I mean, I don't live near it, so I don't have first-hand experience of it, but I could imagine that happening.
Yeah. Okay, are you happy with that now?
I think it etc. covers most bases. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. All right, would you like to press enter on that, Neil?
Okie dokie, and that's gone.
Right, thank you. Right, item 8.2, to note the action by the town clerk after consultation with the chairman and deputy chairman or their substitute. Could I say that at both meetings, chairman's actions and additional chairman's actions, it was Councillor Taylor and myself. Are you happy to note? You've noted those. Thank you. Item 8.3, 3A, there are no street trading applications, but we do have an item under 3B. An application for sale of alcohol at the Phoenix, Guild Street. I was puzzling that actually. Is the Phoenix the original? Is it the original building that used to be the busman's? Because when the place that's there at the moment opposite used to be the bus station, and all you see the bus drivers using the pub. Shouldn't do that today. That's the same. We're talking about the same place, right? Do we have any reasons that we shouldn't agree to this? Can't see anybody. Okay, so we're not objecting to it. Okay, right. Item 8.4, notices of decision. Well, we seem to be pretty in line with what SDC finally ended up with. There are only a couple of items on there which we'd gone, I think we'd gone no reps to, but the applications have been withdrawn. Okay, item 8.5, to reconsider our response to the Pragnell's 5 to 7 Wood Street. Now, our original response was to do with Highways Authority and the Conservation Officer's comments, which we were waiting for. Neil, would you like to say anything on those before we proceed?
I don't know if I do need to, because attached to the agenda were the comments from the Highway Authority, who have raised no objection, and the comments from the Heritage Officer, who have maintained their objection for the reasons that stipulated. I can summarise it if you want to, but you've all had it verbatim, so there's probably no need for me to do that. And obviously, I don't think I need to go through the proposals again. It was only at the last committee that you saw the plans and listened to the speakers. So happy to answer any questions, but I don't think there's anything more than you need to say.
Okay. Well, before we press on, are there any questions that you'd like to ask, Neil? No. Oh. Right, Councillor Cleave.
I know it's not really anything in some ways to do with this particular application, but Pragnell's themselves, as it's a listed building, but has had a lot of work done to it. And did the Conservation Officer get involved with that and object to the changes that were done to the outside of that building? Do you know?
Well, obviously, you're right. It is a listed building, so any internal works that are, let's use the word meaningful, rather than just like-for-like repairs, including the new shop frontages and other things that they've had done over the years, would have all gone through the planning process, which would have involved the Conservation Officer. And obviously, if the Conservation Officer has had any objections to what Pragnells have done with the building previously, then I'm sure the district would have objected to the planning applications and refused them. It's unusual for a Conservation Officer to have an objection and the planning officers overrule them. It can happen, but not very often. So I would assume that all the works that have been done previously that have been through the planning process have been endorsed by the Conservation Officer. This obviously has a slightly different issue in that it affects the conservation area as well as the setting of the listed building, if you like, whereas certain works to the shop front or internally within the building wouldn't necessarily have had the conservation officer conservation area considerations like this does.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Councillor Curtis.
Thank you, Chair. Neil, I don't know if you can answer this at all, or even if I can ask this really, but if Pragnells were able to go ahead and put these bollards in, would that then have set a precedent? I mean, there are 4 other fairly high-end jewellers in Wood Street. So would effectively a precedent have been set that would enable all of the jewellers down there to erect similar defensive measures?
Yeah, it's a tricky one, this, because in theory, the phrase, and you would have heard of this before, I'm sure, each application is treated on its own merits, should mean that precedents don't exist. However, if the district council were to grant this, and one of the other high-end jewellers, or any other business for that matter, banks, you know, if they came forward with a similar argument, a similar case, it would be very difficult for the district council to resist those. So in a way, precedents shouldn't exist, but they kind of do, because you've got to be consistent and you've got to be fair in these things as well. But as I say, each application on its own merits may mean that the circumstances are slightly different for those other ones. Potentially, those other ones may be in less sensitive locations. They might not be in front of a listed building. I would imagine in the town centre, which is pretty much the whole conservation area, it covers the town centre, so that issue would still be there. So it will make it difficult for them to resist it, but it doesn't guarantee that everyone else can have bollards, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, thanks very much, Neil. Thank you, Chair.
Right. Well, we obviously put a holding objection in on this application last time, on the basis that we wanted to see what Highways and the Conservation Officer had to say. Now we've seen what they've got to say, so we really need to re-establish our response. Do I have any one who wants to start the debate? Nobody brave enough? Councillor Cleave.
Obviously, on the last one, I abstained on the vote because I do feel that if we lose Pragnells, which they have said that if they don't get it, they will leave, will have a huge effect on our town. But I don't know if that can be part of a planning consideration. Maybe Neil can confirm that, whether or not. We've lost so many, obviously, businesses already within town. To lose another big one that does have a big draw for people who like to spend money in town. Obviously, it's something we've got to consider. However, I'd also be concerned that if we considered it and said yes, and they got the planning permission, they could potentially leave anyway and have left us with all those bollards. So it's a tricky one to decide, but I'm still in two minds. However, as Neil just confirmed, if the conservation officer goes against it, it's often that we doubt the district council will. But my biggest concerns are still at the moment losing a big business like that if they pull out, if they don't get planning.
Thank you, Councillor Cleave. I was under the impression that they said that they weren't intending to leave at our last meeting. Councillor Lee.
Yeah, so a bit of an inconvenient one where we've got, I think obviously the Highways are happy with it, which is great. So we can take comfort with that. Obviously it's objected to from the Conservation Officer's point of view. I mean, having thought about it, I mean, principally, I could say going outside of planning reasons, I mean, what they want this for is to protect their building, which will have a direct consequence for their insurance position. I understand that they're trying to develop bollards to meet a specific standard, which no doubt would be a requirement for an insurer to give them an insurance policy of a certain level. So I can totally understand where they're coming from, and also from the point of view of not wishing to attract crime into the town. But those really aren't, I suppose, valid planning reasons as such. I mean, I say I get the impression from the conversation they had last week, they're not leaving town. It's all about what stock they can carry, essentially, and they're just trying to basically enhance their business, which I've got absolutely no problem with at all. I think the conservation officer put it quite well, really, in her last bullet point, really, that the proposals are reversible. So the bollards will be on what is public land, essentially, so they can be removed at some point in the future if needed, or Pragnells did move out. But it's really down to do we want to protect the street scene, or that? I mean, that's what it boils down to. I mean, I don't like the fact that the pavement's effectively getting narrower, but I do also appreciate that they've been quite pragmatic with trying to make the pavement wider. So I am coming more around to it, to be perfectly honest. So that's where I'm sit.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. Councillor Fradgley.
I think this is quite a difficult one as well, but I was waiting really on what Highways said, because I do think the safety issue is paramount here. Highways have actually approved of it, so I think if it was objected to, Pragnells could go to appeal, and on that I think they would actually be given permission on appeal because of the safety grounds. On the conservation grounds, I, like Toby, was somewhat comforted with the notion that they could be removed, and that made me think, could we, rather like the wheel, could we actually say we would like to see this put into practice and then have a review of the situation, say in 2 years' time, to see how it's planned out, to see if there have been any issues, and if there were any issues with somebody stepping out into the street or whatever, that would actually cause people to actually look at it to see if it is working or needed any adjustments. I think one of the problems is that if these are going to go in any meaningful kind of way, they do actually fit the anti-terrorist agenda as well. So they do have to be quite close together, and they do have to be of a particular construction to stop any sort of major impact. So thinking it through, I have less objection than I had at the last meeting. I'm still listening to what everybody else has got to say, but I'm moving towards a no reps on it. I wouldn't go as far as an approval.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, Pragnells are probably premier retailer in the town. Great attraction, undoubtedly bring people to the town, work very closely with Far Eastern tourist groups, employ 8 Mandarin speakers, have had a great impact when other retailers, even pre-COVID, were struggling. They weren't. I think so. I don't think they'll ever move away from the town. I think they were just clarifying the fact that the stock they want to hold would be more secure with these in place. And if they didn't get them, potentially that stock would be moved to their London location. I was quite pleasantly surprised to see the response from Highways and the stance that they'd taken. And so I think for me, I think personally, my opinion is I would support this application. I think it's important to sustain their business. So for me, I would be in support of it.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Curtis.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I agree with much of what's been said, that obviously Pragnells, it's a very high-end jeweler. It does undoubtedly bring some high-end spending into the town, but I don't think their security problem, which is, I'm sure, genuine, should detract from the town centre. And I think I think there are far more imaginative and far better approaches to security that would actually enhance the town centre. We're spending a lot of time looking at Bridge Street development and how we can enhance Bridge Street. And surely I think what we need to be doing is thinking of the town centre in a holistic way. How can we improve the town centre for everyone? Rather than putting bollards up, Wood Street could be pedestrianised or made one way with chicanes slowing traffic. You could have wider pavements with street furniture, benches, planters, parklets. They would be just as effective as HVM bollards, but actually far more attractive, would create greater security for all the retailers and make the street more attractive for residents and visitors. And that additional enhanced street scene could actually attract additional high-end retailers. I think that Pragnells have got a problem, but there are far better ways that could enhance the town centre rather than just putting up a whole bunch of very ugly bollards. I don't think that's the solution. It's a monkey on the back. It's their monkey. They should deal with it, or we should deal with it in a far more imaginative and creative way, as befits a creative and imaginative town. Here you go.
Thank you, Councillor Curtis. Councillor Dyer.
My main concern, and I think it's been raised before, is people in pushchairs and limited mobility, that they can safely get up and down but being put in danger. It being a narrow path, it is going to be slightly wider.
Thank you, Councillor Dyer. Mr. Mayor, do you wish to contribute?
I tend to agree with what's been said. Actually, if we look back to when this application originally came to us, and we looked at our objections at that time, I think all of those objections have been addressed now, apart from the conservation one. And I think possibly 18 months ago, I might have been more inclined to give weight to the conservation view. I think that the impact of the last 12 months makes me think I would prefer to support retailers in the town and encourage the town centre. So I think on balance, I'll be in favour of this. Like I say, the bollards can be removed in the future if there's an issue, and should we ever wish to redesign Wood Street or anything like that, that can come into that then. But I think we're dealing with the here and now, and I think I'm in favour.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Cleave, you've still got your hand up. Councillor Cleave.
Yeah, it's a new hand, and Councillor Fredgley has a new hand too. Have we actually asked the conservation officer what she would accept, or has she given opinions of what she would accept? And while I agree with what Councillor Curtis did say about thinking about it in the big scheme, as has already been said, we can remove the bollards. It might be a while before we can look at it, or before the big scheme takes place. So it's something that if we do go ahead with, as Wood Street becomes something, then we can look at it then, because again, the bollards can be removed. And just going back to what Councillor Dyer said, I believe Accessible Stratford has been consulted on this and are happy with it, other than maybe the access way, but they were happy with the pavement. So they are. But yeah, I'm still agree that I think we should consider retail in the town now. It's not just Pragnells, we're looking at retail all over the town, and I think we should be going for it. And I think, as Councillor Fredgley said earlier, and maybe no reps as opposed to complete acceptance, but no reps. Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Fradgley. Do you mute yourself, Councillor Fradgley?
I would agree 100% with what Councillor Curtis has just said, and I think that should be project 2. We're concerned with project 1 at the moment, and I think going into the future that Wood Street should be the next project that we consider, but that's not part of this discussion. And having listened to what's been said, I'm not sure I'd go as far as approval, but I would actually say no reps. Definitely, I would say no reps.
Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to reiterate, Councillor Curtis's vision of Wood Street sounds very good, but at present moment, parklets and such things like that would be more difficult to introduce than the bollards.
Yes.
There is no system for them.
Yes.
I rather suspect that Pragnells don't want to wait until we are ready to relaunch a new vibrant Wood Street. I think this is something that they want as quickly as they can. I mean, they said last time it would only take them a few weeks to install this. And if it can be deinstalled at a later date because of a new model of how we run Wood Street, then that's fine. Do I have a proposal? Councillor Fradgley.
May I propose no reps, but with a comment that we actually we want Pragnells to be successful. We can we capture a number of the statements that we've said that are positive going forward, particularly the point that if they're not successful or if they're deemed to be awkward in any way, that they can be removed, and that's part of the comfort that we're taking in actually more or less approving of this this project. It's a bit sorry, Neil, I'm being a bit muddled in what I'm saying.
Can you just repeat your proposal?
But the simple proposal is that no reps. Comments would capture some of the comments that we've actually made. We do have a concern about what the conservation officer has said, but the overweighing reason for no reps is that the welfare and well-being and vibrancy of the town centre takes precedence in this case. Something along those lines.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that, please? Councillor Cleeve. Thank you. Right, could I take a vote on that, please? If you could put your yellow hands up. Right, I've got 1, 2, got 6. Against? Right, one against and the rest are 4. So that's carried. Thank you. We will now wait to see what Neil has actually scribed.
Can conjure up. What's going on?
Right, so I have hit the no reps button and I've commented as follows. The Town Council has given very careful consideration to this application and the need to find a balance between helping the vitality and viability of a long-standing local retailer and preserving the conservation area. With this in mind, the Town Council withdraws its holding objection and offers a response of no reps.
Are you all happy with that? I actually can't see the
Yes.
Sorry, I'll take that
right. Right, I can't see anybody objecting to it. No objections to that? No, right, thank you.
Okie doke.
Thank you. Right, we'll go on to item 9, which is Chairman's verbal report. I haven't got much to say, just one item. It is almost likely that at the next meeting, we should be having a pre-planning presentation on proposals for Debenhams, which I understand is another hotel, but you'll get the detail then. So that's something to look forward to. With what's just been said about Pragnells, there are some movements in, hopefully positive movements in the town to try and restore some level of people being able to come and stay here, etc. Okay. Item 10.
Chair,
Oh,
Could
yes.
quick question. Sorry, have we not had a planning application on the Debenhams, or was it just a presentation?
This is a totally different application.
So it's completely changed from the last one.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Just checking.
Item 10, request for alteration of recommendation. We haven't had anything. Item 11, to register for the Planning Consultative Committee. I haven't seen any agendas as yet for those meetings. So we'll have to wait and see whether we've got any entries on that. Item 12, to appoint substitutes to the next chairman's actions on the 7th of April. The top of the screen, Councillor Taylor, are you happy? Thank you.
Always happy, Chair.
Yes, thank you. Right, so the date of the next meeting is the 13th of April at 6 o'clock, and I'm now closing the meeting at 19:11. Thank you, everyone.
Can you stop the streaming, Chair, please?
Yeah.